Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Allowing us to get a cup of tea. We're now going to item 8A and 8B, which is Old Buckingham at Cuffer Lane, application 3PL 2021-1528F and 3PL 2021-1690F. I have Andrew Bingham, who's the Vice Chairman of New Buckingham Parish Council, and I have agents Jasmine Ayton and also Oliver Jones. If you'd like to all come and sit on the right-hand side, please. Could I also say that we have 3 members here who, I'll do them individually. Councillor Clark did or didn't vote for the site visit, but didn't manage the site visit, so he's not taking part in any of the debate or obviously the vote. Councillor Dale is the same, but Councillor Taylor wasn't present at the last meeting when it was agreed, or the meeting in December when it was agreed for a site visit. So her options are to follow the presentation and the various speakers, etc. And you can take your judgment if you feel you've got enough information to make a decision. If not, by all means, I will accept an abstention on this issue. I will leave that entirely up to you. Thank you. Councillor Daigan.
Mr. Chairman, I was at neither the meeting which set up this or the site visit yesterday, so I presume I'm in the same position.
Yes, you are.
So I'll make the judgment at the time of coming to vote whether I've got enough information.
That's right. Yes, fine. And Councillor Wilson, did you vote for the site visit?
No, I didn't vote for the site visit, Mr. Chairman. I gained enough information from the report last time.
That's fine. So you didn't feel it's sufficient for you to attend the site visit, so that's fine. With that, then I will accept you taking part in this debate and taking a vote as well if you feel you have sufficient information. Okay, thank you. It's over to Matthew, please, to take the presentation.
All right, so good morning, councillors. So this is a presentation for 2 applications, but I will be giving one presentation as it is on the same site. So the planning applications are 3PL 2021-1528, and that is for the erection of a new agricultural building, and then 3PL 2021-1690/F. This relates to the change of use of land from agricultural to mixed use of agricultural, leisure and domestic, and this change of use is retrospective, and it's also for the erection of various structures including fencing, entrance gate, bell tent, outdoor kitchen, chicken feed store, beehive, chicken coop, a modified earth bund, and also alterations to an existing pond, and I can confirm this is all retrospective. So this is the site here. So the site here in blue represents the site ownership, and just to confirm that all of the land here is proposed for the change of use from agricultural to a mixed use of agricultural and personal/domestic. And then the part here in red, it relates to the 1528 application, and this is for the erection of an agricultural building. And just to give the site in some wider context, so as you can see, it's situated along Cuffer Lane. And then if we look at it from a wider shot, it's just to the north of the village of New Buckingham. But just to confirm that the site does sit within the parish of Old Buckingham. And this just brings me on to the neighbourhood plan. So New Buckingham does have an adopted neighbourhood plan. However, just to confirm that the site here, all in red, represents the parish of New Buckingham. And as part of the neighbourhood plan, there is a part here in blue that represents the parish of Old Buckingham. This was agreed to be included as part of the neighbourhood plan area. As you can see, the site here is situated in the red line here. As the site is outside of the defined neighbourhood plan area, it therefore means that no weight can be attached to the policies of the adopted New Buckingham neighbourhood plan. So this relates to the 1528 application. So this is the proposed site plan, and this shows the erection. This shows the proposed agricultural building. And then here are the proposed elevations for the agricultural building itself. And then this is the proposed site plan for the 1690 application. So this is the one that relates to the retrospective application. So as you can see, you got a kind of penned area here. So there was fencing, and then this was the pond that was extended and altered. You got the bell tent here, you got the outdoor kitchen, you got the chicken feed store here. And then sort of outside of this fenced area, you've got the chicken coop itself. You've got the beehives that are situated here. And then at the front, you've got fencing that's been erected along here. You've got the entrance gates here, and this is where the modified earth bund is situated. And then here are the proposed elevations of various structures on the site itself. And then here are just some proposed sections of the earth bund itself. Okay, so I'm just going to run through some site photos. So this is sort of just to note that if these do look a little bit different from the site yesterday, these were taken from, I think, February 2022. So just to note that if some of the pictures do look a little bit different, that is the reasons why. But those who attended the site meeting yesterday will be aware of what the site looks like in its current form. So as you can see, you got the pond here. So this fencing here, this has now since been replaced by the actual paddock fencing. And then this is just another one. So as you can see, this is the chicken coop here. And then just a close up of the chicken coop. This is the outdoor kitchen. Just to confirm that this was taken in October 2022 following a site meeting with both the applicant and agent. And then, as you can see, this is now the paddock fencing. So this is within the more personal domestic area. This is the bell tent. And then this is sort of looking at it from afar. So you can see sort of the more personal use section here. These are the beehives. And this is the entrance gate. This is the modified earth bund. And then I'm just gonna scroll back. Just to sort of know, this is more where the agricultural building itself is going to be erected, so you can sort of see it is nearer the front of the site here. So I can confirm that both applications are recommended for refusal for for being detrimental impact on the character of the area, and also not being sensitive to the landscape of the area. And furthermore, the application for 1690 has also been recommended for refusal on ecology grounds. So there are concerns about impact on great crested newt from the alteration of the pond itself. But the 1528 application had no objection raised, and that related solely to the erection of the agricultural building. And then there was also a further reason for refusal on there was no GI RAMs secured as part of the 1690 application due to the erection of a bell tent. The only reason for refusal that has since been dropped from the December planning committee, where this application was the last heard, was the reasons for nutrient neutrality. We have now as officers been able to screen out the application and don't consider that there will be an impact on the defined catchment areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, I've got Andrew Bingham, who's the Vice Chairman of New Buckingham Parish Council. Oh, right down there, sir. Sorry. That's okay. You have 3 minutes, please, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, committee. Thank you, everyone, for visiting the site yesterday. I think that was a great benefit. What you saw yesterday was not what was there before, but you saw what is there now. Bear in mind, this is the first application is a retrospective application. I ask you to consider your views against what was there originally. And what was there originally was a grass meadow, a very simple hedge along the front, a very simple agricultural field access, just a plain ordinary grass meadow. Cuffer Lane, you saw it, is a narrow lane. It's used by many walkers, pedestrian or cyclists, equestrians who walk up and down that lane. It's a very valuable amenity. What you did see is large earthworks, a big fence on top, I don't know, 5 meters, 7 meter high embankment along the front. You saw another bank behind that, a large pond that had been excavated, no regard for the ecology that was in there. There was no pre-excavation assessment done of the ecology. This is what the applicant wants. He wants to hide the activities, I don't know why, from behind the barrier. Just for context, New Buckingham is designated in your local plan as a rural settlement with no boundary, so it's unsuitable for development. So consider it in that context. This is a new development outside of the village in open countryside. The village is very opposed to it. You will have seen on the website a lot of objections to what's been carried out to the site, even at the moment, without approval. And in fact, development has continued, as Matthew has shown you. There's work being continued on this site since the application was made in December 21. There's new fencing gone up, there's new buildings, it's changed over that time, regardless of the fact that the applicant knew that he had no planning consent. So yeah, so the village are opposed to it. Both parish councils, Old Buckingham and New Buckingham, both opposed to it. Your local member is opposed to it. Your own officers are recommending refusal. We are very concerned about what this use is going to be. The applicant wants to put up a large building, an industrial building. And let's be honest, it's not an agricultural building. There is no purpose in having a building of that size on a single field where you need to store bits of equipment. You just need a simple, small tractor to cut the grass. You don't need JCBs, you don't need forklift trucks, as are on the site at the moment. So the village believe this is going to be for industrial purposes. It is a massive building for a single field. No one ever needs something of that size. So it's industrializing the environment. I will finish. So I ask you, support the local community, so take notice of your board member, listen to your officer's opinion, and please, we ask you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I've got Jasmine Ayton and Oliver Jones, 1.5 minutes each. Oh, he's going to do all the talking. Right, okay, that's up to you, sir. You have 3 minutes. Off you go.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We've been here before, obviously in December, and some of you saw the site yesterday. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but you did meet my colleague Jasmine, most of you did. You've heard from Mr. Bingham as well, and much has been made of the site being industrial. It's not industrial. It's quite clear to see when you're there, it's not industrial and it's not planned to be industrial. We've not applied for industrial, so industrial shouldn't be in the question. The applicant needs the agricultural store because, as we discussed before, there are instances of theft which has been made disclosed to Breckland, and he's had constant issues with people walking across the site and coming onto the site. There is cameras on the site that have captured people again trying to steal things off the site, which is the rational reason for having the building there, for equipment and for cutting the grass and maintaining the land, as well as his own personal use for leisure, which obviously you've seen yesterday. The chickens and the bees, as he discussed before, was for himself and his daughter. The pond and the issue with the newts, we've been discussing with the ecologists, and we are trying to resolve that, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve that, even if it is part of the conditional later down the line. That will be resolved, we believe. We've also had discussed nutrient neutrality, and that's been screened. The applicant had a bell tent on the site. As you can see, he's not planning to live there. They've used it for camping, as they have done through the summer. And the applicant has been made aware that he shouldn't put anything on the site without planning permission, which is why every single item that's been put on the site has been described in a retrospective application. There is no rational reason why he shouldn't be able to use it for leisure, we believe. We believe he should be able to use it for leisure, given the change of use, and if the change of use is acceptable to yourselves. One of the questions raised yesterday was about the building and the colour of the building, and we've discussed that we believe that should be green, but we are open to suggestions on that if you've minded to approve it. The applicant has obviously discussed before about issues with theft, which is why the fence was put up. The fence was put up after there was an issue with theft. Previous to that, it was just left as it was with the hedging at the front. The fence was installed after the issues with theft, which we discussed previously. Happy to answer any questions you have, and obviously most of you have seen the site and we have discussed it before, but if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. It's open to questions from members. No. Oh, Councillor Atterwell.
Chairman, I've got a few questions for officers, if I may. If this was just an agricultural meadow, am I right in saying you would be allowed to keep chickens on there anyway? So that's my first question. If it's left as an agricultural meadow, would you be allowed to ride quad bikes on there? A quad bike? I believe you would, but I'd like that answered. And if it's an agricultural meadow, and we had an application to put an agricultural building on there, chances are we'd probably look at that favourably because it's agricultural use. So the fact that this has been used for more domestic purposes seems to me that if the applicant, if that was just agricultural, there's a whole host of things they could do with the site anyway under permitted development without needing to put a planning application in. So that's, I probably might have some more, but if you could answer those first, thank you.
Yes, thank you, councillor. So yeah, in principle, the chickens, albeit they're on site at a relatively small scale, but in planning terms, both farmed agriculture, arable, and the chickens would constitute an agricultural use. So it wouldn't be I'm going to put my teeth back in, sorry. The fact that chickens are on there and it's got an agricultural land use currently, before you granting planning permission, that would be pursuant to the existing land use. So there's not a material change of use. So in answer to your question, yes, as an agricultural land, they could put chickens on there. The buildings or structures may be limited and need planning permission, but yes, the chickens themselves could go on there. With regards to quad bikes, yes, you could, if you're a farmer, you're in a piece of land, you can take your quad bike on there and drive around that piece of land. Obviously, it'd be the use of any quad bike / bikes where a material change of use was happening. So if every weekend 10 quad bikes were going on there racing around a track, then it may constitute a material change of use. But if one person is using a quad bike on a piece of land that they own throughout the summer and then not the winter or once a month, then that is not a material change of use in my view. And finally, with regards to the agricultural building, it may be that not even a planning application for the agricultural building would be required. You do have permitted development on agricultural land to erect buildings within certain parameters. So on land less than 1 hectare in area, then you can erect 465 square metres of agricultural building, for example, without the need for a planning application. But there are parameters about distance to the highway, etc. But within reasonable parameters, a lot of agricultural buildings don't actually need a formal application for planning permission. But Councillor Atwell is absolutely right. In an agricultural use, we would support agricultural buildings that support that use.
I might have missed it, but you said 465 square metres for an agricultural building. What's the floor area of this one?
£182.
So considerably smaller than probably would be permitted under agricultural use anyway. In terms of the pond, I wasn't aware of the situation with the newts, but when we went there yesterday, can you confirm that pond isn't lined? That is clay in the pond, and the blue dye was put in there specifically for the fish, because when the sun beats down on it, that would turn green without the treatment. And that's perfectly environmentally friendly dye for that use. The beehives, you could put them on agricultural land as well anyway. If we were minded to approve this, could we condition it so it's restricted to the building, that the proposed structure permanent structure and the temporary buildings, could we condition it so that there's no more structures put on the site? And if there was a need for those, that they would come back with another application. And finally, could I just say, I don't know if you want to just bring the photo up for those members who weren't at the site visit yesterday, the picture of the little summer type building with the kitchen. That's it. That's the word, the kitchen. Because that didn't look anything like that yesterday. That was much more, I mean, it was grassed all around it. And I actually thought that was better screened yesterday than is shown on the picture that's there. So that's my take. I just really want a clarification on, if you don't give permission for this, what the applicant could do for agricultural use under permitted development, which wouldn't basically have the rules of engagement in place, shall we say, as to how the site could be used.
I think it's worth mentioning, I agree fully with Councillor Atterwell with his final comments regarding the kitchen building. When I first arrived at the site, my first comment to myself was, oh, they've taken the bell tent down, because you couldn't see it. You couldn't see it until you went right onto the site and right round the corner. Oh no, that is still there. It's so well screened, or in the words of the Vice Chairman, hidden is another word, but it's so well screened, I didn't even realise it was still there. And also, I'm not sure if members happen to see, which is the benefit of a site visit, that in the neighbouring field, which I've been told is a stabling block, but that's quite a substantial building, which in what I could see from the plan of the proposed building was possibly very similar dimensions. So to have a building alien to the countryside, no, not specifically so, because there's already one next door, which is where we got into colour, because it's black and we're talking about greens, etc. Anyway, that was just for those members who didn't attend. I thought that might be worth mentioning. I'm going to take Councillor Wilson, Councillor Plummer, then I'll. Right, I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, and then I'll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so basically, are the applicants using the meadow like a private domestic area for like family use, because you haven't got a big garden where you live or something like that, basically? And that's what it's all about. Okay, and what do you plan to put in the agricultural building if permission was given?
He's been using it to, well, he wants to use it to store his tractors and things in, and also to store the equipment, so the quad bike and things like that, because there's associated equipment with the chickens and the bees. There's also the fact he's got a tractor on site that's been stolen before and had equipment stolen from the site before. So it's basically to store everything in somewhere that's locked and secured. That is the only real reason, and the security reason.
Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Guilty. I've got a piece of land exactly like that, and I've had chickens on it. I've got a tractor which is slightly smaller than the one we saw yesterday, but I can expect a visit, can I? But this is 1998 I did this, but I would say that if what I saw yesterday was what I would have done with that piece of land if I'd owned it, and I can't say any fairer than that.
Thank you, Councillor Plummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can the officers correct me if I'm wrong? Norfolk County Council Highways says no objection. Environment Agency says no objection. Ramblers, no objection. Norfolk County Council Public Roadways, no objection. Tree and Countryside Consultant, no objection. Contamination Officer, no objection. Ecology, no objection. Natural England, no comment yet, and the biodiversity, no comment. So at the moment, I haven't got anything which says there's something against it. Everything is no objection. The other thing I want to just quickly comment, I turned right when I left the site, nearly got run down by an agricultural tractor, which was literally taking the whole road and the bank. So that was that. And when you go around the corner, where that building you're talking about, they're storing commercial vehicles. So there's a commercial vehicle stored there. So when the parish council says we don't want this here, I think they need to clear up some of their own bits and pieces before they start on something that's new. And I agree. The main reason for the building is for security. Because if I had those pieces of equipment outside, I'd be very frightened about losing them. So I'm in favour of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got councillor, I'll come back to you. I've got councillor Gilbert, then councillor Kyber, then councillor Atwell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering whether, looking at the building and looking at the field, we're putting the cart before the horse, or are we talking chickens? Because if I had that land and I wanted to do something with it agriculturally, I think I would want a building on there to store equipment to do it with, rather than do whatever you want to do with it and then say, can I have a building to store this stuff in? So I think we've got chickens and eggs and carts and horses here.
Well, I don't accept the chicken and egg, and I've been here before, and I have told you, you need to read your Bible. God made all manner of animal and fowl, and the next day he gave them the ability to reproduce. So the chicken came before the egg. So you learn something today. Now, I've now got Councillor Kyber, please.
Yeah, I don't have any major objection to what's going on there. I think crime reduction is an overriding matter to be taken into consideration for the use of that site. I think the most incongruous thing is the black fence in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if there's any scope for planting to screen the fence.
Yes, could we ask the agent with regards to planting?
I think there could be, or we could move the fence behind if we needed to, behind the hedging, because at the minute it's in front of the hedging. We can always move it behind so that it's screened if we needed to, or we can put something in there. That wouldn't be a problem, yeah.
It started off negative and went on positive at the end.
Yeah.
I think maybe, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, well, you've got the just from the members. Councillor Atwell, please.
Yeah, just wanted to say on the security of the building, I was also struck, security is obviously an overriding factor for this applicant, because the construction of the building is more expensive than your standard tin shed, because the bottom half of it is going to be brick all the way around, purely so people can't cut into the tin and get in and help themselves to what's inside it. There was 2 large tractors on site. They were covered up, I think, with tarpaulins when we were there, so they're obviously going to be stored in the building. Just want to clarify that environmental health have got no concerns about the skip what's on site, because I read on some of the comments about burning rubbish on site. There is a steel enclosed skip on site which is used to burn the straw waste from the chickens. That was evident because the straw was in the bottom of it yesterday. And as far as I know, that's perfectly acceptable. My father keeps some chickens as well, and that's what he does with his. The waste from it, that's the best way of disposing of it, and obviously with bird flu and all that, that's why they put it in the enclosed skip. But I don't think there was any detrimental comments from environmental health regarding the burning of that on site. Again, I think you're entitled to have a bonfire. I think if it's agricultural land, you can have a bonfire on there, same as you can with domestic property. That's not something that you can't do, but there are do's and don'ts with it.
Rebecca, please.
So with regards to bonfires, there is legislation outside of planning, because bonfires themselves aren't development and therefore they're not controlled by the planning process. So I can't go into the details of that, but there is separate environmental legislation about bonfires. With regards to environmental health, in the event that planning permission, they did, as Councillor Plummer pointed out, raise no objections to the applications, plural, and they did suggest a number of conditions in the event we were to grant planning permission, which includes no generators or compressors, no external lighting, and matters with regards to the waste with the chicken coop. So those, in the event planning permission was granted today and conditions were delegated to officers, then officers would look at the exact wording of those conditions to make sure they meet the tests in the NPPF and the legislation. Just to quickly say, it may or may not help in your deliberations, but your policy, your policy says that you need to consider the intrinsic beauty and character of the countryside in your deliberations. So obviously, members, it's within your remit. The fact that we have no statutory objections doesn't prevent you from considering policy and weighting policy appropriately. Statutory objections, particularly highways, with regards to highways policies, are particularly useful in that weighting. But the fact that there are no statutory objections doesn't mean that that policy weighting exercise has been carried out by those statutory consultees. That's the role for your planning officers and yourselves as members of the planning committee. So hopefully, to help you out, you need to consider what is the impact on the intrinsic beauty and character of the countryside and make a judgment, a planning judgment in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can Rebecca tell us if it's going to be affected by the GI RAMs, and if there will be a tariff paid if it was given permission? Does that come into it then, or has it been looked at strategy?
So your test with GI RAMs is whether you've created additional overnight stays. Obviously, we've been to site and there is a bell tent and I assume a decomposter toilet. No, no toilet? Sorry, there is a bell tent. So technically, you are generating additional overnight stays. So in the event we were to grant planning permission, we would require a unilateral undertaking to make the GI RAMs payment of £185 plus change towards designated sites within the district, or not within the county, sorry, not the district.
Councillor Plummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it was quite apt that Rebecca's mentioned about the aesthetics of the area when we've just ruined 200 and odd acres at Great Dunham, and we're talking about 5 acres here. You know, I mean, when you come to aesthetics, the parish councils of those were up against all this, and you know, we approved it. So to start saying about aesthetics for an agricultural building, I think it's getting a little bit crass.
Okay, well, I would remind you, Councillor Plummer, that you did vote for the one at Dunham as well, that we ruined the open countryside. So be careful your choice of words. Thank you, Councillor Atterwell.
Yeah, can I just come back on this intrinsic beauty of the countryside aspect again? So we heard earlier on, Rebecca confirmed that if left as agricultural land, potentially agricultural building could be erected on there under permitted development. Yes. Yeah. So the fact is a building could go up there anyway, whether this permission goes ahead or not. And in terms of that building, do we have a steer from officers with regard to the colour of the cladding? The applicants have said green, which I have to say I support, because I think that's, but is that something that we as a committee would have a preference on, that we want to state now? Or are we happy to delegate that to officers? Because I think that's quite an important decision on the outlook of the thing.
Yeah, either way, members, if you want to specify a condition, that it's up to you and your planning balance to say what is necessary to make this application acceptable. If you think it has to be green, for example, you can state that, but either way we would seek to condition the materials so we can control the colouring in the area, so it's not pink, for example, although I'd quite like that idea. Can I just respond to Councillor Plummer's point, if that's all right, Chairman?
Yes, go on then.
So I don't want to go back to the last application, but the last application, you balance the landscape impacts with the planning merits of the application. So we accepted that there was a landscape impact from that development, or you accepted that there was a landscape impact from that development, and we put in the planning balance, looking at the development plan as a whole, what the material planning benefits were of that scheme in terms of renewable energy and the other matters. And we did a planning balancing argument. I don't think you're doing that here. Because what would be your planning merits of the application? What is the benefits of this person using this land as domestic land, essentially? That's why I didn't mention the landscape policy. Your policy would be Gen 01, which is, does the development impact the intrinsic beauty and then character of the countryside? And by all means, you can answer that question no. Your officer's recommendation is the answer to that question is yes, but of course you can take an alternative view. I just hearing the room and the way this is going, members, you also need to consider that you have a holding objection from our ecologist, that there's insufficient information provided with regards to ecology and the works that have been done on that site with specific regard to the change of use application. So you need to consider how you would deal with that matter in the event you wish to recommend this application for approval. And that's just me listening to the room, not guiding you in any direction.
Councillor Attwell.
I would assume that if we were minded to approve the application, far greater minds than I that sit on the top table would be able to advise members as to the wording that would be
got two options with regards to ecology. In the event you wanted to grant planning permission in this instance, you could seek to condition the ecology matter, which I wholly do not recommend that you do, because you need to deal with ecology up front as per your policy in that regard, which is ENVO 1, I want to say. ENVO 6. I'll look that up in a second. Your alternative option, which I would wholly support and recommend in the event you were to grant planning permission, is that you delegate the matter of ecology to officers. We go away with the applicants, we ask for the additional survey information which is required to satisfy the ecologist's comments, your ecologist comments, and we review that information and achieve a no objection from our ecologist before the granting of planning permission. That would be my recommendation, but those are your options in front of you, as I understand it.
Councillor Attwell.
And in terms of the intrinsic beauty of the countryside, that's a subjective view, and we could take the view that this is not going to affect that. Yeah.
That's why you went on the site visit, and that's for you to determine.
See, no, that is the benefit of a site visit, and I'm one who always tells you, do you need to stand in the middle of a field and look at a field in this situation and the situation with Shropshire? Yes, you do. So I was always wrong in the past, sort of. Okay, I think we've bashed the hell out of this now. So I think it's time that we take a vote. I've got two applications to go through. So first of all, I'm going to take A, which is 3PL 2021-1528F, which is the erection of the building on this site. Your officer's recommendation is one of refusal. Can I have a show of hands for refusal? No. Those against the recommendation of refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And abstentions, please. 1. Well, Vera, you just didn't take part, that's fine. 7 and 1 abstention from Councillor Taylor. Okay, from the floor then, I'm just going to take this one singly. So can I have your recommendations as to why you disagree with the officer, et cetera, on the erection of the building, which is this item? Someone? Councillor Attwell?
I think on the basis that a larger building could be constructed on there under permitted development, I think this is acceptable in terms of its size and need for the site. And I don't think that that will be detrimental to the landscape character of the area, subject to the right cladding choice.
Okay, to condition the cladding. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Wilson was first. I'll take Councillor Wilson as the seconder. So from the floor, then, your recommendation is that we approve this item with regards to the erection of the building. Could I have a show of hands for approval? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. and those against? Oh, none this time. Oh, no, abstentions, please. One abstention. Yep. Sorry, Mr. Horn.
Subject to. So the minutes will read that a delegated authority. Oh, it's okay. So. Sorry, I thought.
That's okay. 8B now, 3PL 2021-1690F, and that's the change of use on the land. I've just lost my screen then. But change of use of the land, chickens, kitchens, bell tents, etc., etc. Everything else that was involved, including the fencing, fencing along the road, but you may wish to condition some hedging, which we could do that with the officers as an add-on to the end. So your officer's recommendation on this one is one of refusal. Could I show of hands for refusal? None. Those against the recommendation of refusal? And from the floor, could I have your Councillor Atwell? Oh, abstention. Sorry, was there an abstention again on that one? Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And could I have your reasons from the floor, please?
I think that the change of use is acceptable, but I would like to have the condition in about the hedging that be delegated to officers to work out with the applicants on the frontage. And also, do we need a condition in there that if there's a requirement for any other sort of structures to be built on the site, that they would have to come back to the planners for approval on that? And also what we've said about the ecology, that needs to be delegated to officers as well. But with all that in mind, I think that is acceptable.
Yeah, Rebecca.
What I heard Councillor Atterall maybe was that the change of use was acceptable because you don't consider it impacts the intrinsic beauty and character of the countryside. Is that all right? Thank you.
Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Gilbert this time. Thank you. So from the floor, your recommendation on this item with regards to change of use, etc., is one of approval. Show of hands, please, for approval. 7, and those against is none against. Abstentions 1. Right. Abstentions. Okay, this item is approved. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to Dereham, 9 School Lane, 9B, 3PL 2022-1284 HOU. And we've got Debbie Hook, who's a supporter, and Jonathan Burton, who's the agent. Please, if you'd like to come and sit on the right-hand side. Councillor Doigan.
Just had one representation from a person in my ward.
Okay.
On this.
That's fine. Thank you.
Well, it says not to pass it on to anybody.
Okay, if we're already over to you, please, Lucy.
Afternoon, councillors. This is 9 School Lane in Dereham, application reference number 3PL 2022-1284 Howe. This is a retrospective application that seeks permission of a 1.2 metre timber post and panel fence with a 0.5 metre trellis to the front and side boundaries of the site. This application is being brought forward as an objection has been made by a planning officer here at Breckland, as well as a member of senior management staff. I'm recommending refusal of this application as this is contrary to policies COMO 1 and Gen 02 of the Breckland local plan, as well as the MPPF. Therefore, we're bringing it to committee in the interest of transparency. So this is the location plan for the application. And then the site in the wider context. As you can see, it's a tight pattern of development within a residential area, with dwellings surrounding the site and the existing highway to the south. The site is within the settlement boundary of Dereham. And then that is the site in relation to the settlement boundary. And then this is the proposed site plan for the application. As you can see, the fencing at the front of the site abuts a highway and the existing vehicle access is to be retained. Here is the submitted elevation plan showing a 1.2 metre timber panel fence with a 0.5 metre trellis to the top. So the overall height is 1.8 metres. So these are the site photos. So here's the fencing that you can see from the existing highway, so School Lane. And then the one on the right is the panel fencing face on. And then, sorry, they're a bit blurry, but these are the other fencing along School Lane. So soft boundary treatments and low-lying fencing. And then within the objection raised by the planning officer, 13 School Road was mentioned. As part of this proposal, the proposed fencing was requested to be reduced to 1.4 metres. Therefore, there's a set precedent along School Lane, and in order to remain consistent, that's why it's been brought forward. And that's closer up again. The main objection regarding this application was concerned that the fencing would appear out of character with the area, specifically appearing much more imposing and visually dominant than the others in the street scene. As previously mentioned, when number 13 applied for the fencing of the same height, they revised that this was unacceptable, and it was subsequently lowered. There are also highways considerations. However, the highways officer has not made an objection to this scheme. Other objections have been raised concerning the same issues as previously mentioned, as well as highways considerations as impeding the view of the pavement, as there's quite a few schools and daycare centres. Following Chairman's panel, there was an attempt to reduce the 0.5 metre trellis, but the applicant wishes for the application to be determined in its current form. So overall, the reason for refusal is the height of the fencing abutting the highway is considered to result in a more visually prominent form of development, detrimental to the character and appearance of the street scene, contrary to policies Commo 1 and Gen 02 of the Breckland local plan.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay. I've got Debbie Hook, please, who's a supporter. You have 3 minutes, please. You okay to have 3 minutes? Yeah.
Hi, I live opposite, so I look at that fence the whole of the time that I'm at the front of my house, and I don't have any objections. I know when Mr. Sanford moved in, I've had to, before the fence was up, I've had to check probably 2 or 3 people going around looking in the skips and when he was doing his work and stealing things out of it. So if he has it there when he's away, he shuts the gates, his choice, his house, his property, is my view.
Lovely, thank you for that. I've got Jonathan Burton, the agent, up to 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, councillors, for allowing me to represent Mr. Sanford today in respect of the application. It's acknowledged that this is a retrospective application, with the work being undertaken when the applicant first moved into the property early 2022. In essence, this is a domestic fence which sits within a road frontage that has varying elements of boundary treatment. Reading the case officer's report, the single issue appears to be the height of the fence. It is felt the officer's description of School Lane, generally characterised by low-lying fencing, is slightly misleading. Gives the impression that the applicant's fence towers above anything in the road. The road has a mixture of fencing and hedging, both at low level and also high level, the latter exceeding 1800 millimetres. There are 2 existing examples of this proposal in School Lane, at 1A School Lane and at 46 School Lane. Unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of overhead images. I took the antiquated view of printouts. So that shows the evidence that existing fences of this nature exist. Other examples of fencing generally around Toffwood and the wider context of Dereham and Swanton Morley have been erected adjacent to the highway. And again, I've got printouts here, following a drive around yesterday, taking photos that can be seen. I've tried to balance these against planning records, but unfortunately, I can't find anything for this. There is obviously a degree of privacy and screening that the applicant wishes to gain from this proposal, and it is acknowledged that the planning officer states the proposal will maintain an acceptable level of residential amenity for neighbouring properties. I do not feel the fence causes an aesthetic harm to the street scene, perhaps if it was a solid timber panel fence, but the applicant has constructed trellising to the top, which I personally feel adds a degree of softening to any overall potential impact. Again, an image offered here shows the overall street scene looking in a westerly direction along School Lane towards Shibden Road. There have been no objections raised by the Town Council nor from County Council Highways in this respect. I feel therefore that the application should be considered favourably when looking at the overall appearance of School Lane and the wider context of Toffwood and Dereham. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's open to questions from members, Councillor Attwell and then Councillor Clark.
Chairman, would it be possible to see the photographs to be circulated round for members? I just want to say, when I saw this application, I know School Lane quite well. I travel along it quite often. And I'll be honest, I drove up and down twice thinking I was going to come across this really garish fence, but I struggled to see what the problem was, because the fact that this is not a full 6-foot fence, and the fact that it has got the trellising on the top, and the fact that there are other properties clearly along School Lane which have got equally high fence. I mean, if we're to say that this applicant can't have this fence, will we be looking to take enforcement action on all the others that have been erected down there? No, I don't think so. I go past the school and the school railings on the gates are bright blue and well over 6 foot high. A lot of School Lane, you've got chain link fence and abutting the playing field. I just think that this is such a small frontage. If the neighbour who's living directly opposite has no problem with it, I personally think we should just let sleeping dogs lie and let these people enjoy their property. And I think that, as a good halfway house, we've got the trellising at the top and it's not been painted any garish colour. I think it blended in quite well. But honestly, I drove down there, blink and you miss it. I fully support, giving approval for this application.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. One of the questions I was going to ask, which was about when this went up, the office, and I think you said early 22. I think that was correct, wasn't it? Yes, thank you, John. When did the fence go up? Okay, lovely, thank you. Questions I've got, well, one's observation is that street scene up to a point can have a degree of subjectivity, as in all planning applications. Thinking of the comments that were made about the chairman's panel, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll just run through the question. It would seem that if it had the 0.5 trellis removed, then it would then be acceptable. So though it's a solid boundary rather than the soft treatment boundary, that would then be acceptable. I agree with Councillor Attwell's comments, because I know the road well and surrounding roads. I've walked up and down them umpteen times in political campaigns and so forth. Looking at, in terms of the height, whilst we've got soft treatment like hedges, different types of hedging and evergreen down that road, I'm sure some of them are at least the height of that fence, if not exceeding it. So you could have a dense hedge, which is
blocking out light at the street as opposed to the fence. And again, I think no, there's been no statutory objections from members of the town council. What I've noted the pictures of that have been passed around by the agent, and there's nothing there to indicate, I'm afraid, the height of some of those other areas. Like I think there's a trellis fence shown there, which is up and down like that, and I think that's probably, I think you referred to 1A, I think it's the other end of School Lane. So in terms of precedent, I don't necessarily see that on the scale of precedence, or in terms of intrusion on the street seam, in terms of the scale of culpability, it's at the high end. Obviously, the planning officers are suggesting that this is actually, you know, a technical breach which needs to be remedied. Can I just ask one more question of the officer? One is that, are we talking about the removal potentially of the whole fence or the top of the trellis? Because if we're not giving permission, they've got to revert back to what would be acceptable, or is it also the sides, either side of the fence at the frontage as well? Thank you.
Okay, do you wish to come in and chastise me in front of my members?
Just a couple of points, really. One, a procedural point. This is why we require any illustrations to be submitted to the officers in advance of the committee date, so we're able to verify those pictures before they're presented to members of the planning committee. You know, we're just having a quick look now, but the majority of the photos shown aren't from the immediate street scene, and therefore wouldn't be representative of the character of the street scene. And some of the photos are very different to what we're considering here, albeit open trellises, reduction in height to the frontage of the property, which is essentially what we're asking for through the application process. And that is generally why we ask for photos in advance of the planning committee, so officers are able to verify those photos and explain them to members adequately, so they can take that in their assessment of the application. In trying to be helpful again, members, your policy is policy COM01 of the local plan, essentially, which requires you to look at the character of the area and the street scene and make an assessment as to whether this would negatively or not impact that. And obviously you have the benefit of the officer report to guide you in that process. I would just like to remind members that this was the subject of an enforcement complaint, and there is a neighbouring objection to the application. So on the grounds that there are concerns about the fence in the local area, as well as the neighbour standing today who's spoken to you and said she has no concerns. With regards to hedging, hedging is not development, so it doesn't require an application for planning permission, and therefore you're unable to control the height of hedging in any situation or location. And generally, the permitted development only allows you to erect a close border fence up to 1 metre in height adjacent to the public highway without requiring planning permission. You'll note from your officer presentation and the report that a lot of the fencing in this location is in excess of that, but this is significantly in excess of that, and that's where we think that the change of character has arisen. And although you may find examples of higher fencing and hedging in the area, you don't know the background to that, how long it's been erected. You can only make a judgment on this application and the application in front of you, which we have set out in the officer report why we believe that it does impact the character of the street scene. It's completely within your remit, members, as you're fully aware, to take an alternative view in that regard. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, the officer has ripped the plaster off my wound, and I'm going to go to Councillor Atwell, who probably wants to stick it back on again.
Well, with regard to the photographs, I would just say that it's not normal practice to accept a report from CPRE after Friday for a previous application that we sat there and listened to earlier on. So I think the photographs, I think, is acceptable. I think that there's certainly councillors around this table have got considerable knowledge of the local area down School Lane. In terms of photos, I can't remember, and Mr. Burton might be able to answer me. Was there a photo there for one at Swanton Morley? Did you take one at Swanton Morley? Yeah, okay. So can I just ask the officers, at Swanton Morley, for instance, we got dwellings there on an estate that had mature hedging that was ripped out in its entirety and a 6-foot close border fence put in, and the planner said, yeah, no problem, gave them retrospective permission. So how are we in an area that everybody was up in arms about? So how are we basically being consistent here? I think I said earlier on, anybody who knows School Lane will know that we've got blue railings at the school, we've got chain link fencing, we have got an assortment. Yes, there are properties there with low fencing, low walls, but there are properties clearly in School Lane that have got high 5-foot, 6-foot fencing that's been erected and nobody's batted an eyelid. So if we refuse this, what are we going to do about them properties? Are we going to go back retrospectively and take enforcement action if somebody complains? Where does this end? Where do we get some common sense?
Well as putting the plaster back on, you've made a few more wounds and put plasters on them. Could I ask my solicitor to kick me up the backside again?
No, not at all, Chairman. The bottom line is you have to take each case on its own merits, taking account of the general street scene. If, when all is said and done, you are of the opinion that this is not objectionable and you're happy with it, then vote accordingly. I don't think it needs to be any more complex than that. It really doesn't need to be any more complex than that.
Thank you. Simon?
And just to respond to the point in respect of the information from the CPRE, that was submitted yesterday. Officers were able to have a look at it and to have regard to it and present it to you in a balanced way and within context during the presentation. So there is a material difference.
Yes, I know we have thrown in that because yes, it was a bit rushed, but we've done it. Councillor Kittle-Morris, and I think Councillor Kye-Bird, and then Councillor Daigan, and then we're going to call an end to this.
This is quite simple in my opinion. It's street scene and highway safety. Those are the two overriding factors in this particular application. Not the photographs that have been sent around, but the officer's presentation photographs clearly do have an impact. It is 6 foot tall, but there are fences along the road in that photograph that are roughly the same size, same height. Highways have got no objection, so highway safety is not being compromised by the height of the fence. So in my opinion, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Councillor Kye-Bird.
Yeah, I think for me, the test is, does this improve or enhance the street scene? And for me, the answer is no.
Councillor Daigan, please.
I thought I'd better say something as it's in my ward, but to me, this is one of the times one really is literally sitting on the fence, because I can see it from, to be honest, I can see the arguments from both sides. I think some of the neighbours who objected, I can see why they're doing that, but I can see alternatively why the person wants the fence. And as I think in the area, there is quite a lot of different fences, etc., or treatments. Actually, my main objection to it is the horrible sort of, I'd actually like the fence painted some colour just to make it rather nicer in the environment. I think the horrible grey type timber that it appears to be is, to be honest, makes it a bit ugly, to be honest. But as I say, I think I'll have to sit on the fence on this one and let the other members of the committee decide, because as I say, I can see it from both sides. And I suppose the only thing is that it would have been much better if there had been an application put in originally.
Thank you. Well, I'll leave that to Councillor Clark and Councillor Gilbert to pull the splinters out of that. Councillor Atwell, please.
Just to be clear, just to clarify for me, so if it's decided today that this fence has got to come down, the applicant could in reality put a 1.2 metre, 1 metre, a 1 metre high fence out there, paint it pink or fluorescent yellow, because colour isn't a planning consideration, paint it whatever colour they liked, and then we'd see what the neighbours would think of that. I would think if you've got something that's a natural sort of wood colour, it's got to be better than what could be put there under permitted development. At least we're regularising what is there, and that's the way I look at it. My colleague Mark behind me is quite right. Highways haven't objected, and to be honest, Chairman, you know, to me, this is just a no-brainer, knowing School Lane and knowing the different types of fencing down there. I mean, you could put chain link fence up, just like you got in front of the school, and that would be acceptable to planning office as well. That's not something I want to see on my neighbour's property. And I think that's what we need to consider. What could they do as permitted development as an alternative? And the alternative could be something that a lot of people don't like.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've skirted around this enough. So I'm going to take the vote on item 9B, 3PL 2022-1284 HOU at Dereham. Your officer's recommendation is one of refusal. Could I have show of hands for refusal, please? 4, and those against refusal? 5. So from the floor, your reasons for disagreeing with the officer's recommendation, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The majority of the committee, I feel, agrees that the height and design and has no detrimental impact on the character of the area or street scene.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Atwell. Show of hands, please, for approval of this retrospective fencing. That's 5. And those against? 4. Okay. This fencing is approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, members, our last item for today, 9C, 3PL 2022-1003F at Necton, which is the National Grid 40 kilowatts substation. We've got Simon doing this one. Are you here to hear this item, sir, or gentleman at the back? Oh, you're here for this item. Fine. I didn't know if you'd come for something else that we might have done already. Thank you. I didn't want you to sit here waiting to hear one of them that we've already done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for full planning permission for an extension to the eastern end of the existing Necton substation. Just to give you a bit of background, development consent orders, as I'm sure you're aware, have recently been granted by the Secretary of State for the development of both the Norfolk Vanguard and Norfolk Boreas wind farms. Part of those works include extensions to the existing Necton substation to the east and west. National Grid is the applicant in this instance, and as the transmission license holder will be transferred the benefit of the DCOs in order to construct those extensions, which will provide all the necessary electrical infrastructure assets to facilitate the connection of the Vanguard and Boreas wind farms to the national transmission network. It's important to note that they've advised that the proposed extension is not required for the DCO schemes. You need to be clear on that. It is instead needed to ensure the network remains secure, resilient and reliable, with the increase in electricity generation in the wider region, including the ever-increasing energy generation from renewable and low carbon sources. The application site is immediately adjacent to the Necton substation extensions consented under the DCOs. The DCO schemes were subject to significant public interest, and the application has been brought before the committee in the interest of transparency. So just looking at the location plan there, the application site is depicted within the red line, and you can see the access there onto the A47. The blue line depicts the extent of the existing substation and the substation extensions consented under the DCOs. Those extensions have yet to be built. So just looking at the site in the wider context, it is a rural area. You'll see there the existing substation, and there will be extensions either side of that, as will become clear shortly. The main primary substations, which will eventually come before this committee, will be located in that sort of region there. So just to give a bit of context, the existing substation is that black section in the middle. The consented extensions to the east and west are those depicted in red and blue. And the application site is located immediately to the east, and that adjoins the extensions consented under those DCOs. So just to clarify, that's the extension area we're talking there. And that's the area where you have the existing substation and the consented extension to the substation. So that is a 26-meter extension from the existing consented scheme to the edge of the site. There you can see it in elevation. It'll be a similar design to that of the existing adjoining substation and the consented extensions. It'll have a maximum height of 11.5 meters. There will be an extension of the perimeter palisade security fencing, which will be 2.4 meters in height with an additional 1 meter electrified fence above and around the substation site. That will be a galvanized steel finish. They propose to complete the extension at the same time as the consented DCO extensions to minimize any disruption associated with the construction phase. It won't be permanently staffed and there will be no additional scheduled visits required for maintenance. The operational requirements will be no different as a result of the extension proposed under this application. So just a couple of photographs showing the substation, which you can just see in the distance from the A47, and this is just from slightly further in the site, and you can just see the extensions in the distance there, and a location plan to look at. So this is a relatively minor addition to the consented works, and whilst it's on grade 2 agricultural land, that land is already consented to be taken up by the substations and the extensions to the existing National Grid substation as well. Given the need to ensure that the electricity network remains secure and the conclusions of the Secretary of State in determining the DCO applications, the loss of that land is considered to be acceptable. In design terms, it is what it is, really. It's a functional extension to a substation. It's never really going to be pretty, but we have had it independently assessed by a landscape consultant who agrees with the findings of the landscape visual assessment, noting that the extension is relatively modest and sits on the same development plateau as the adjoining substation area. The Parish Council have objected to the application, with design being the key area of concern. The report sets out this in detail, and it's considered that the Parish Council have somewhat misinterpreted the requirements of the DCO in this regard. They also voiced concerns regarding mitigation. The development consent orders require the pre-commencement submission and approval of a landscaping management scheme and associated work programs in accordance with the outline landscape and ecological management strategy that formed part of the submissions to the Secretary of State. Indicative plans demonstrate that the application site will be surrounded by landscape planting, and a pre-commencement condition has been recommended to require the submission and approval of a landscape scheme. The site is not located within a statutory or non-statutory designated site for nature conservation. It's wholly within flood zone 1 in relation to flood risk and drainage. The drainage strategy approved under the DCO is considered to be sufficient to accommodate the proposed additional extension without giving rise to any cumulative effects, and we've had no objections from the LLFA. The applicant has proposed a 15% off-site biodiversity net gain through the provision of off-site habitat units associated with the Wendling Beck Environment Project, and that will be secured by a Section 106 agreement. The closest residential property is approximately 575 metres to the northwest of the application site, which is marginally further away than the extensions approved under the DCOs. There's no objection from the environmental health officer, subject to conditions controlling noise levels, and those are proposed as part of the recommendation, members. The site's currently in agricultural use, and there is a risk of contamination being present within soils and or groundwater, but there is no objection from the contaminated land officer, subject to appropriately worded conditions to deal with any unexpected contamination. In terms of highways, no objection from the county highways officer or from national highways. There are no issues in respect of heritage assets, and it's located outside of the nutrient neutrality catchment area, but notwithstanding that, it doesn't create additional overnight accommodation. No objections from local residents or from technical consultees. So accordingly, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a section 106 agreement securing 15% biodiversity net gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kittle-Morris.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll speak on your behalf, really, as it's your ward. I know that Breckland is doing a design study on which forms part of the objection from Necton Parish Council. I understand, and I think we ought to tell members that that design only applies to the towers of the main substation and not this one.
I'm on now. Yeah, the work that we're doing with Vattenfall in relation to the DCO is in relation to the main substation buildings located sort of the rear of this, and don't include this element of the development now.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members? No. Good. Okay, on this item, which is item 9C, 3PL 2022 1003/F at Necton. Your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Can I have a show of hands, please? Yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. No one against that. With that, I'm going to close the meeting, but I'll just ask members just to hold back just a moment afterwards. This meeting is closed. Thank you.
Schedule of application.
Oh, sorry. Someone just sorry. Item 10 is applications determined by the Executive Director, 87 to 104 for your information only. And